Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and now Blue Sky at Hawk Blogger. And it is a Friday morning. When we're coming to you a day after Thanksgiving. For us, for Mike Sando and myself, it is not quite Thanksgiving, but we wanted to make sure we had something available to you. So if you're watching this, not live, so if you're chatting at me, if you're asking us questions, I probably won't respond because we aren't there when you're watching. But let me bring in Mike Sando to the show. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I like this week. We are doing this early, but I like it because, Thursday I basically watch football, don't have to cover it. So I kind of structure the week to where really do get some time on Thursday, and that's great. You can see me today. I'm wearing a hat and a sweatshirt. That's a little different for me for doing these sorts of things, but it's just kind of uh, it's a week that reminds you to, if you can, spend time with your family and in a when you might normally be at work. So.
What is your typical Thanksgiving? Where were you doing
Uh-huh.
Thanksgiving this year?
So we're typically at home. So my wife and I both grew up in Northern California, so we have a lot of family there. We don't go down for the Thanksgiving thing because football season, right? I mean, we're not going anywhere. We'll have this week's different because my oldest son got married last weekend, so he's on his honeymoon. Usually he'd come over with his now wife, or his girlfriend before, and then my youngest son and his girlfriend uh, would will come over too. So we'll have something. My wife really loves cooking. She loves baking, cooking, all of that. So she's pretty elite, uh, and I I wouldn't want to be. I mean, I would gladly go to someone else's house to eat, but it wouldn't be as good. Just put it that way.
That's a good thing to be able to say. What's the first thing you go after
Um,
on the spread?
so we had in truth, for me, usually I'm an eat in order type of thing. So
Hmm.
it's ridiculous. Like
Okay, that's all right.
I'm a big meat eater, so I go after the meat with the gravy, and then I kind of go around. But I'll say this: we had a strategy session every year on what do we want to have for sure at Thanksgiving, and I'm going to tell you about a dish that normally sucks:
Hmm.
cream of corn. I mean, who
Oh,
likes cream of corn? Usually not good, in my opinion, but this super version that my wife makes with mascarpone cheese, Parmesan cheese, and bacon
ooh.
is super rich and really, really good and could make me go out of order. Could make me go for that first. Also, like a good mac and cheese with maybe some good Beecher's cheese is hard to resist too. So those are a couple things that are beyond just the turkey that I really like.
Those are solid. It's funny. I think Thanksgiving's got to be tough for the orderly eaters or the people that like to keep their food separate. Like, for me, it is the mixture. It is the bite where you get a little bit of potato,
Oh yeah,
you get a little bit of turkey, you get a little bit of stuffing, maybe a little cranberry sauce in there. Like you put it all on there,
I'm
and
fine with that. I'm
all
fine
those
with that.
flavors
But
work for me.
yeah,
Work for me.
yeah.
Before we get on to football, so your son got married. This is
Hmm.
happening during a bomb cyclone, power outage. How did
Yeah.
that all go?
It was a little nerve wracking. So they had reserved a venue, obviously, well in advance, and then the wedding was on Saturday, and there was no power at the venue Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There was another wedding supposed to be there, and they had to go somewhere else. Now they were telling us, hey, this is the restore date or time, but you never really know. It did come on in time. It came on
Mm.
like at 2 a.m. the day of the wedding. So everything really fell into place. It could have been, generators and trying to figure something out, but it really couldn't have been better. Everything worked out. So we're very grateful for that. It ended up being a wonderful day.
Is this your first kid to get married?
Yeah, it is. So I got two sons, and first one to get married and feel great about it.
It's experience I've yet to have,
Hmm.
but I could just imagine, man. Congratulations. I kind of milestones for kids for me. Obviously graduating high school, going to college, kind of living independently, then graduating college, or, wherever not everyone has to go to college, but at least in my experience,
Sure.
getting a job, getting settled, starting an independent
Yeah.
life. And then, yeah, like when they find somebody they want to spend their lives with, I think that's got to be a pretty special moment as a
It
parent.
it is like he was, he even like a couple of years ago, Dad, I'm not getting married for a long time. I got, I'm only in my 20s here. And in my mind, I'm thinking, you don't have any idea. You could never find somebody that you want to marry, or you might
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
So he found somebody, and it was pretty quickly he knew. All right, I'm going down this road. So alter plans happily, and for me, super meaningful, Brian, because not just as a parent, but see, my dad died when I was 17.
Mm.
Unexpectedly, I was in high school, so I never really knew him when I was an adult, and I always that kind of put a fear into me of like dying young and that sort of thing. We all could die at
Mm.
any time, obviously, but you don't
Hmm.
really think about it, right? You sort of think you've got this however many years. And so to be there for the moments, for that type of moment, to know him as an adult now is really an extra special thing for me. So not taken for granted. It had an extra meaning.
I can totally appreciate that, and it is a different relationship. I with my father. Once I had my own, even with just my own apartment, and like all of a sudden you have different adulting things to talk about with your dad that you wouldn't otherwise have. You're going to
Yeah.
find your son coming to you for things he would have
Yeah.
he would have never
Yeah.
thought he'd come to you for before. So,
It's great.
I'm happy for you, man. Congratulations, and
Yeah.
congratulations to your son and his new bride. So
Yeah.
that's cool. And appropriate on to be grateful for something on this week. So, um, a group that's probably not as grateful as we are right now are Jets fans. Um, and they are struggling through another lost season. And we'll talk about the Jets Seahawks a little bit, but
Yeah.
there's a probably a totally baseless rumor that I saw on social media somewhere that Pete Carroll is potentially a candidate to be the new Jets coach next year, which would be a fantastic story. So that's why I want to talk about it. But talk about first, what do you think's going on with the Jets? Where do
Uh-huh.
you kind of lay responsibility for the state of that franchise?
Yeah.
And then let's talk about where they might go with coaches next.
Yeah, I do think the ownership sets the tone. I think there's different types of owners. I think there's actively good, meaning they're engaged and they actually drive success and they hold people accountable and they're in the office and you know that they're there and they're a force of good. Then there's kind of guys who may swoop in, but they're a little bit absentee. So like somebody like Stephen Ross of the Dolphins has a lot of stuff going on. He's going to swoop in. He's going to maybe influence some things, but he's not going to be in the office every day, right? And then I would say like a Shad Khan is sort of hasn't had success, but I don't think he's like screwing it up. He just hasn't gotten the right people in there. I don't think he would be a bad owner to work for. And then you have somebody like Woody Johnson, who I think probably of the Jets, he's the Jets owner, who would be probably more of an actively negative force, where
Mm.
we've seen some reports come out, and look, when these reports come out, you always got to grain of salt it a little bit because there's people behind the scenes and protecting this guy or that guy. But I think we have a feel that he maybe just makes some decisions that are not collaborative and comes in and there was a report he wants to bench Aaron Rodgers after 4 games, or he swoops in his helicopter Jay Glazer had, lands on the field, and then fires the GM, but didn't really have the conversation necessarily with everybody. I think that's a wild card type owner that makes it hard to function, right? And we've seen occasionally like Jim Irsay be in that boat with that whole Jeff Saturday thing. They may do some good, but when you act emotionally and that sort of a thing, I think it impedes the long term
I'm
ability. You can overcome it, but it's just
Yeah.
harder.
Yeah. We're talking to Mike Sando of The Athletic. Make sure you give the show a like and click subscribe and find all Mike's work over at The Athletic. Um, I'm curious, and I don't know if you even know the answer to this, but I kind of have become aware over the years of how the general managers, the front office people, use the press to get their messages out there. I've become aware of how agents use the press. I've become aware of how
Sure.
players or coaches. I don't have as good of a feel for owners. I mean, owners don't need to care what anyone thinks about them, but I'm sure they're human and they do. one, do you think that the owners are like, getting messages out in the press? And if so, how do they do that? Do they work with the team's PR people? Do they have their own people? Do they have direct relationships? How does that kind of work?
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes the owners want to have it both ways. They want to influence the decisions, but not be accountable for them. So
Mm-hmm.
I think in general, though, in general, most of the reporters are probably not in a constant contact with a lot of the owners. Now, some of them are way more involved. I can kind of tell sometimes. Just some of that's having a little bit of inside information, but I have noticed sometimes in media, like even owner related type tweets or these sorts of things where it doesn't like it's not like a huge red flag where I think they're completely driving the conversation, but sometimes I always ask like when something comes out like why would this come out? Like who would this benefit a little bit? And like I said, it doesn't mean someone's necessarily just running with the agenda. They may be trying to get the information and that's where it comes from. But I do have antenna up for that and think that I think it's crept in a little more. I think they do really totally pay attention. I think they pay attention more than the coaches do sometimes. And they care more sometimes what the media thinks. And so they're fans a lot of times, right? They're not in all these meetings 20 hours a day. They don't really know how it all works as well as a coach does, right? And so when they see a story that comes out negative, it can have ripple effects through the building.
Hmm.
It can be the reason why something happens. I think they really do pay attention to the media. So they may be influenced by the media more than they influence the media. Does that make sense?
It does. It absolutely makes sense, and my interactions with that level of people in the NFL holds true there. So, getting back to this Pete Carroll rumor, whether or not there's anything truth to it for the Jets, do you think Pete Carroll is going to be a legitimate candidate for any positions next year?
Well, yes, he could because it feels like for whatever reason, there's more of a push towards the people that have coached before. And you can look and see, who did well this year in the coaching thing. Whatever it is, I noticed like Tom Pelissero put out his list, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And Tom had that theme. I think it was Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Had that theme of like, hey, this is kind of the year of the not the retread, but the guy who's done it before. And then I talked to a couple before that. I'd talked to a couple people that just I talked to about these things. It's a very common thing in the league. Everyone half the conversations you have this time of year are like, hey, let's go through the places that could open because everyone's looking, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
are they going to lose their job? What's going to open? Where's the places you could get a promotion in? How many GM jobs open? And the conversation I've had that way too sort of centered around, hey, some of these guys who've maybe done it before. So if that's the spirit of it, why wouldn't you consider guys who've done it before at a high level, which would be Pete? I think Pete's age normally would be a big problem. I don't think he feels old. I think he's one of those 70-year-old guys who feels like he's 60 a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, right? As opposed to a 60-year-old guy who feels like he's 70.
Well, it's interesting because nobody talks about age with Bill Belichick, and he and Carroll are essentially the same age. Like they're very close in age. So, but for whatever reason, it comes up with Pete more. And the last thing I'll kind of bring up with Pete before I want to talk about Bill Belichick as well is it'll be interesting because if I would love to see him get another chance and have success somewhere else, and I think most Seahawks fans would feel that way. Unlike when Russell Wilson went somewhere and there was a lot of Schadenfreude, like people wanted him to
Yeah,
fail, like they
yeah,
cheered for him to fail and they reveled in his failure. I don't think that's how anyone in the Seahawks fan base feels about Pete Carroll, and I think you know, I don't know if it will happen, but it would be fantastic
yeah,
to see him to return to one of his
yeah.
old failed places and build a winner there in New York.
Well, and they obviously need a lot of help organizationally of just how to run
Hmm.
a team. And
Yeah, build
so
a
I
program.
think when you're looking at the right hire for the right type of organization, I think they need somebody who can come in and have the blueprint. Whether you would change it or you don't agree with all aspects of it isn't really the point. Like he has a plan for success for an organization and could be somebody that would have great insight, for them. And so I think I would much rather have Pete Carroll hired by the Jets than probably a lot of people. Right? They
Hmm.
don't need the next Adam Gase or somebody who Ben Johnson, in my opinion. I think that's where you go to fail. It's too big of a job. It's too hard. The media component's hard. I would want somebody in there who's a seasoned person and
Yeah.
can handle this stuff, and the organization could look to.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That's why, most of the time I see those things roll by and I just like, whatever. But something about that actually clicked to me and made some sense. And I could absolutely see Pete wanting to go back to some place where he was fired and leave on his own accord. So it would be cool if that happened. Bill Belichick obviously is another guy. And as we're looking at these, where people will go, I'm curious where you think is the most likely, place that Bill Belichick ends up next year.
Maybe he's the Giants.
Hmm.
That was one that was rumored a couple years ago, even or a year ago.
He's got
And I've
background with
heard,
them, right?
yeah, oh, no doubt. Well, he was Bill Parcells' coordinator, and so think of this. Think of from an ownership standpoint. You're John Mara, took over the team from your father when he died 20 years ago, 2005 ish. You were probably on the practice field when Bill was the D coordinator in the glory days, right? And now
Hmm.
you've kind of been all. He didn't hire Coughlin or draft Eli. Those two guys were there, so all of his hires have kind of been failures, right? Everyone that John Mara's hired has a losing record, and so what are you latching on to, right? Like you in your mind, you've tried to do things the right way. You've tried to bring in Joe Shane, who was, came up through kind of the way you would hope a GM would progress, right? You gave him control. You got Brian Daboll, who seemed to do good things with Josh Allen. I mean, you kind of the things were kind of by the book, and it just hasn't worked. So do you go back to your roots a little bit, right? And just, you know what? We got this quick window here with Belichick. Try it. We got to try something. I don't know that it would work. Uh, Bill Belichick, and we could ask this question to Pete Carroll too. Who's your staff,
Hmm.
right? Do you want to the Belichick road is Josh McDaniels and all of those guys, Matt Patricia, right? I mean, that probably in a neutral state doesn't excite you that much. But for the Giants, from where they're at and the history that he has there, I think it's a place he would love to go. I think he's always kind of wanted to coach there, probably has a great affinity for it. It could make some sense.
Makes a lot of sense, especially given some of their defensive personnel. I mean, Bill Belichick getting a hold of Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, you can absolutely imagine him doing some good things there.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I it makes me think about the San Francisco 49ers a little bit. And
Hmm.
as we're going to eventually get to talk about Seahawks, so people waiting, we will get there.
Yeah.
But the 49ers are in a bad state right now, right? They lost to the
Uh-huh.
Seahawks. They are injured. They just got blown out by the Packers. It's looking a little bleak there. And there's increasing rumblings about Kyle Shanahan's stability and security as the head coach of San Francisco. Do you give any credence to that? Because it feels like Shanahan would be snapped up the next day
Yeah.
if he hit the market.
It doesn't feel like that's really coming from the 49ers building, though. It just kind of feels like that's media stuff, doesn't it?
I I think so. The piece that starts getting my attention a little bit is I think you know as well as I do that the people that do pay attention to how fans are feeling and how media are talking
Yeah.
and the general tenor is the owner.
Yeah.
And at some point, does the owner feel like people look, Mike, I was at the game 2 weeks ago. That
Yeah.
stadium was half full for a 6-5 team fighting for like that point, they were like fighting for the
Yeah.
division. So I just
Yeah.
kind of do wonder if Shanahan has lost, like, does he have enough buy-in to build? Because they're gonna have to rebuild. Does he have enough buy-in for the next 3 to 5 years, let alone just the next year?
What's interesting about it is it would be a complete, you'd think it'd be a complete reset because Shanahan hired John Lynch, right? So if you were to move on from Shanahan, are you going to go with Lynch and have him help hire the next coach? It just feels like a step back to me.
It
I
does.
think they need some kind of a reset, right? An energy reset and all of that. But I don't know that I would be real excited to just blow the whole thing up. I mean, even this season. It's not like they've won one game. I mean,
Right.
they've had a lot of stuff kind of stacked against them, and they have some real decisions to make. But I think as an owner, I would rather keep Lynch Shanahan team and just say, all right, let's take a deep breath here. What's your plan? What's our way to get through this? And if the plan is to keep mortgaging and bringing back all the old guys, maybe you have to reassess that, right? Because there's a lot of guys like George Kittle, Kyle or Juszczyk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trent Williams, Debo Samuel's future, right?
Mm-hmm.
All we got Brandon Ayuk with an injury. You got to have a plan forward, but to me, throwing everything out just feels like caving to the moment where it's disappointing.
That's my take as well in general, and I think most most people that are in the division would be happy to see Kyle Shanahan exit the division.
Yeah,
I mean, that I think that should tell you a lot. It does.
right.
The one name that to me, at least, I would wonder if an owner would say, you know what, I want someone who's going to get us a championship, and this guy Shanahan has not done it and consistently made decisions that has kept us from getting there. Maybe we want Bill Belichick to come in here and take over the 49ers. I don't know if I see that marriage, but he's the one name that for me, I'm like, I could at least understand how an owner could get to saying, all right, we're going to reset and we're going to have this guy come in and do it.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, think of their structure and who is empowered within the organization,
Hmm.
right? You would have obviously Jed York as the owner, and then Parag Mate too, who's been there for 25 years as kind of a team president, and he oversees a lot of stuff even beyond the 49ers. But I think has an input, is definitely a football decision maker and has run their salary cap in the past and influences it now. Are those the types of people that are going to be like, hey, you know what? Let's get rid of these guys and let's just hand it all over to a 70-some-year-old guy who's going to phase us out. I don't know if that makes sense to me.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. As we kind of close on the state of the 49ers in general, one question that I'm another one that I've kind of set aside as silly, but now I have a little echo of question about it is like the Brock Purdy decision. Brock Purdy, like to me, whatever he costs, market value, you sign him. He's a good quarterback. He's young. He's meshed well with Kyle Shanahan, but one, he has struggled to really under the weight of what he's had to carry this year as the season went on. And now, two, he's had two injuries to his throwing arm. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's any hesitation about giving him, like, if you're going to be rebuilding, are you sure that's the guy that you hand over 55, $60 million a year to?
Yeah. Well, how about this though? He's indifferent from most of the quarterbacks because he was just the last pick of the draft, right? He wasn't a
Hmm.
first rounder, so he's made no real money, right? He couldn't retire off of his earnings right now and never work again, right? So this with this injury, is there an opportunity to get a deal that makes sense for everybody, right? I go back to 10, 15 years ago when Colin Kaepernick and Andy Dalton were two good young quarterbacks who made no money on their rookie deals because of where they were drafted, and they ended up kind of signing deals that had high averages but really were a little hollow, right? But they got their money. I remember Kaepernick got like a $16 million signing bonus, and I think he had made $1 million or something, or something like that. He'd
Hmm.
made little amount of money, relatively speaking. So, could you do a deal that's not 60, 65? Look, if they were winning all their games this year and going to the Super Bowl, you probably are in that world. But is there a middle ground that makes sense for him that makes sense for you? That's a number you can live with. It's going to be above Geno Smith and it's going to be probably above Baker Mayfield, but maybe it's below those absolute top deals. Could you do something like that? And if he doesn't want to do it, okay, do you want to wait then?
So your interpretation there is 49ers don't hesitate to do the deal. They just try to get it at a better price.
I would think so.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes
Would
sense.
that make sense to you? Like he's good.
That's generally speaking, I find like when you have a quarterback, a quality quarterback, you keep them. You keep them as long as you can keep them, and as long as you believe that they're going to progress, be able to sustain that performance. The only thing I would say is if there's anything that they're finding
Yeah.
that gives them pause about that shoulder staying healthy, um,
Right.
then I have a little bit more question. But I even then I still think I do what you're saying, which is maybe have some different structure about guarantees and playing time and stuff like that, so the team doesn't
Totally.
get messed up if it turns out that his health is
Yeah.
an issue.
And in the meantime, he gets some nice guaranteed money that he's set for life, right?
Yeah.
And you're just banking on the idea, hey, this guy was, from where he came from, he might be happy with that.
Um, Before we get all the way to the Seahawks, it makes me kind of think about the next area of the NFC West, which is the Rams. They were the second most likely team to win this division, and interestingly, those are the two maybe least likely teams to win the division now. They've got a 36-year-old quarterback. They just got run off the field by the Eagles last
Yeah.
week, and
Yep.
in this last game. What do you think the plan needs to be there? And, like they're not in a full rebuild, but it seems like the offensive line help that they spent a lot of money on has not really come to pass for them. What do you think happens in LA?
I would think that this would be the last year for Stafford there. They kind of, when he asked for, more money or get his contract redone, they did it. And then they did it though in a manner where they can get out of the deal. Like there's no guaranteed money for him. I don't think beyond this season. So I would think they'd be looking at this year, unless they really finish great, and saying, we had some holes on our team, and we really needed Stafford to overcome them, right, and just
Mm-hmm.
be almost like a top tier guy for this to work. And he maybe has done that a couple times, but hasn't done it consistently. And we can talk about the injuries at receiver or whatever. But I see like a future where, you know, Stafford and Cooper Cup probably aren't on the team, next year. And
Mm-hmm.
then where is McVay at that point? Is he excited to play Jimmy Garoppolo? Or are they going to get somebody else? What do they want to do while they continue to kind of rebuild the roster? I think they did some great work hitting on a couple of defensive linemen that have been good for them, but their defense hasn't been good this year on the whole, and really got just slammed by the Eagles the other night. So, yeah, I think they're in a little bit of a. It'll be a little bit of a time to reset, probably.
Well, it's interesting with that team because they definitely have got a really effective pass rush now. They got a couple of rookie pass rushers that are showing up, and that's great. And everyone gets excited about that. But they fail to remember that the run defense has been bad. Their actual coverage has been bad, and the defense as a
Yeah.
whole has not been very good. So they still are not quite where they need to be defensively. Is there? I mean, there was serious consideration for Sean McVay. He's acknowledged that he thought about leaving the game and going to
Yeah.
be, a broadcast booth and getting out of there. If this is Stafford's last year, do you think there's any chance that there could be a surprise there and McVay just says, you know what, I'm going to let someone else take this over?
There's always that chance because we've heard it every year. I
Mm-hmm.
felt that it was genuine, that he kind of got a good mental reset before this season. I sensed that just from watching from afar. And I've been down to the Rams a couple times. I've talked to him about it,
Mm-hmm.
and you try to get that feel for yourself, kind of where he's at. I felt there's been a spring back in his step. I feel like this year when they've lost, a part of him hasn't necessarily died at the podium after the game. And I felt like in the past, my gosh, this guy can't do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's unlikely to walk away. I think when he came back this year, that's probably for a little bit of a next iteration. That's just
Mm-hmm.
been my kind of feel. So, hey, we're a Jay Glazer. Hey, don't be surprised if away from that being different, right? That could always
Yeah.
happen because it feels like McVay has these sort of cycles, but I'm not feeling like that's his mindset this year.
All right, let's talk about the Seahawks. The Seahawks have two straight wins against the 49ers and against the Cardinals. What have you seen from that team?
Say again, which team you're talking
What are you
about?
seeing
Sorry.
from the Seahawks?
Oh, well, definite, huge, encouraging moves on defense. I feel like they're the opposite now of the hopeless feeling where they just run on you every play. So it's really been I think that's been really nice. I think stopping the Cardinal run game wasn't a given at all. They've run the ball decently this year. So I think they're in a much better place that way. With really all my questions now are on what they're doing offensively. I think that's where the spotlight's going to be. And you raised it a couple weeks ago when we talked, hey, do you think Ryan Grubb's in any kind of trouble or, this type of thing? And I don't think he's in trouble, but I think it's going to be under scrutiny uh, for just sort of how they play. They have shifted a little bit the last couple weeks, but they're still predominantly a super high rate of five-man protection, super high rate of shotgun, super high rate of three and more wide receivers. And I don't know if that's the world they will always want to live in. And so I think some of those questions about what's the adjustment or is there a pivot coming up or how good of a job are they doing with their protections and that type of stuff, it needs to be in focus the rest of the year now. If the defense is indeed fixed, and to me, the defense shows signs that it might be fixed.
Yeah, I was going to play this for you, but I'm going to read you an answer to a question I asked Mike McDonald this week. And you can tell me how I did on this question, but I tried to bring in some of the military that he loves so much to the question. I said he had brought up on his morning show, this was back on Monday, that he acknowledged that all the coaches in that room had never really worked together. They didn't have reps together, and they've been coming together over the course of the season. And so I used that as an entree to, in the afternoon, ask him, I said, it seems like it's a little bit like assembling, your submarine crew, like your NFL season. You got a lot of the same faces in close quarters under high pressure for months. And, he kind of, I hadn't heard that, but okay.
Yeah.
And I said, if you were to give advice to a first-time head coach, knowing what you know now, would you put more priority or higher priority on bringing in people that you had prior relationships with? And I'm going to read you his answer here. It's a little bit long, but I'm curious your thoughts. He says, I've thought about this. I think that's a short-term answer to that. So I don't know if it's just the longer-term solution. There are definitely trade-offs to just hiring people that you know, but is that the best thing for your team long-term? I don't know. It's probably different for everybody. If you're someone that runs a specific system and you need guys that run your stuff, it might be the way to go. But yeah, there's a lot of lessons learned on things like, hey, if I ever do this over again, how could we get ourselves to a better spot and understand some things? Absolutely, I think about that. That's going through our minds all the time. You don't have that luxury, though. The luxury you have is tomorrow and the rest of the day. So you try to make the best of that. It's a long answer.
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
Well, that sounds like, hey, I love being 37 years old. No one who's 37 wishes they were 52, right?
Yeah.
But he's saying, I wish I could have this thing both ways where I'm 37 starting out and I had relationships with 10 different OCs and kind of had a better feel for how things would go so that I could have chosen a more finished product, right? That's what it would be ideal if he just had some guy that he knew exactly what he was going to get and didn't have to worry about it, right? So this is going to be a little bit more work. I don't think it means that, that it can't work or that they're not going to keep going and trying to get better. But, to me, there has to be progress over the course of the season, or else how do you have confidence that it's going to get better, right? And I don't feel like I don't feel like they're progressing offensively necessarily. Do you?
No, they're definitely not. I mean, there's little glimpses, but if anything, it's been a downward trend from the beginning of the season to now offensively. But I think that the thing that fans often don't realize or factor in is there's not a Ryan Grubb or this clear next better option. When you're picking whether you stick with Ryan Grubb, it's not like Mike McDonald has had a year to gain experience with another offensive coordinator somewhere else. He's still going to be in the same situation, and he will have to start anew with somebody if they were to change offensive coordinators. And, you've built up some level of conversation with this OC for this year, and you've had some of that development of shared experience that you won't have with someone that you start fresh. And the personnel department has to learn what that OC and potentially the offensive line coach who's attached at the hip to your OC
Sure.
wants in players. And so it resets that clock, and not always in a good way. And so I think that's part of where I'm not sure it's as clear of a just he has
Yeah.
to coach better. I think there's some other factors at play.
Well, you could definitely stay the course and with some changes, right? And we're going to agree upon these changes and let's work on it. That's one. There is also the, hey, is there somebody already on the staff
Mm-hmm.
that you could consider for that type of a role? You know, that's one to consider. And then I do believe he has. I do believe that after being while you're a head coach for a whole year, you have a chance to think about these things more than when you don't even know if you're going to be a head coach, right? The head coaching
Mm-hmm.
thing, it wasn't like he knew he was going to get a head coaching job last year and had all this stuff lined up, right? I mean, I think the additional time could help him, whether it's with his relationships or just with his view on what he would want. And then going through it this year, he'll have a better view because he's been thinking about the offense every week now, where he didn't before, of exactly how he might want it to be. We talked before that you know that wasn't the front office was involved in the hiring of Grubb more than it would have been for like Pete Carroll, who came in with
Mm-hmm.
his own guys, right, or his own defense or whatever. So you know maybe there will be a point when Mike McDonald gets somebody that he really wants, but he didn't know who that was before. It's early, you know. I want to see it play out and see how it goes, and then see what the real options are. But I think I think that's where our focus is going to be the rest of the year, probably, right?
100%. And to your point, and we've talked about this in the past, the guy that I would think that they would go to is in house, Jake Peets, who came under from Sean McVay, who Sean McVay did not want to lose. The Seahawks were able to wrestle him away from LA, partially because a lot of promising offensive coaches don't want to stay in a place where they don't have the ability to rise up very far, even to be a play caller there. I think he would be the next obvious choice if they were to move on.
And he has does he knows McDonald from the does he know McDonald from the past? I'm trying to
I
think.
don't know their prior relationship.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
there
I'll
might
have
be
to
more
dig
of a
in a little
connection
bit
there.
there.
There might and he was also with Norv Turner, I believe, in Carolina. He might have been the
He's
running backs
had
coach with Norv.
He had basically he was in a lot of college places. So he coached. I think he coached at Alabama with Saban. I think he has
Yeah,
coached at LSU. So he had a pretty extensive college experience. But I don't
yeah,
know as much. The I guess I'm looking at he was the Jaguars assistant quarterbacks coach in 2012. He
yeah.
was with the Redskins in 2014, the Raiders in 2017. So yeah, I think at one of
Yeah,
those stops
he's
it's possible.
probably yeah, he's probably you know, pretty involved in what they're doing now even or you know, could be or so that would probably be the name to think of if they, you know, didn't want to have a huge disruption. I think that's all early, you know. I think
Hmm.
they're going to evaluate over the whole rest of the year, but like I said, it's with the defense now not in a free fall and actually looking good, you know. Okay, is the offense going to progress and how?
Mike, we're talking to Mike Sando of The Athletic, our weekly Friday show. So before I let you go, now that the defense has stabilized and even kind of started excelling, and you see the rest of the state of the NFC West, what do you I mean, the Seahawks dug themselves a big hole. They were low in conference record, low in division record. They've got a few tough games left against the division and definitely against the NFC North. What do you think's possible for this team? Like, what do you think realistic, like in terms of how they can finish this season, relative to the other teams in their
Yeah.
division?
Well, I think they can win the division. And, you know, that home win over Arizona was huge. They'll get them again in 2 weeks. They got the Jets now. So I feel pretty good about where they're at. I think when you look at the coaches in the division, uh, is their side of the ball, their specialty, where's it at? How good do you feel about it? I think that's a good question to ask. So Kyle Shanahan's offense is kind of in a shambles right now, right? Tough. Uh, McVay's offense, not necessarily hitting on all cylinders. And then Gannon's defense, I think, has improved, and you'd be happy with the way that they're going. But uh, you know, they just lost to Seattle, so if Seattle beats them again, you got to like the Seahawks' chances, right? I don't know that they will, but I think they're right in the mix of it, and probably have can feel the best right now over the last month in terms of their side of the ball with their coach, the vision of that looking how they want it to be.
Makes sense. Mike, anything else going on in the NFL that's got your attention that we should spend a second on?
Off the top of my head, I think we're good. I'd have to look. Is there anything? What do you got? Is there? We're
Well, we will have. Unfortunately, we can't talk about any of the Thursday games that will have already happened when this airs.
no.
But I am curious. Bears Lions. Caleb Williams, I thought, had his best performance as a pro. Did some things. Not
Yeah.
only I've joked about the fact I kind of consider him like the dude perfect of quarterbacks. He makes all these crazy throws, but can't do the basics. He did it all against the Vikings. They still lost, but I'm very curious. Like, this might be silly by the time this airs. That game against the Lions in Detroit. I'm wondering if that's going to be a closer game than most people anticipate.
Well, I think that they match up decently with the teams in their division. Chicago is interesting. I was listening to um, there's a podcast, and it had Martellus Bennett and Keenan Allen on it. The host's name is Kaplan. I saw it on there.
Adam Kaplan.
No, it's not Adam. It's a different Kaplan.
Got it.
But he used to work in the NBA. But it was amazing. I mean, these two guys were talking about the change of coordinator from Waldron to Thomas Brown, and these are guys like on the Bears, obviously. And it was very interesting how they felt that the communication had really improved, and that before the change, a lot was kind of being left to Caleb in terms of how he wanted to play. And that with Thomas Brown taking over, it's been a little bit more of, no, okay, on this play, the read goes here, here, and then you can do what you want to do, right? This play, the read is here, here, here. Then if that's not there, you do it. Sounds like kind of basic stuff to me, but I thought they were pretty revealing for a couple of guys who are on the team currently, talking about the inner workings of how it was going on. I thought that was interesting. And I think we've probably seen that with Caleb Williams just looking a little bit more like he's on point and running the offense instead of just uh, trying to survive out there. So we'll see what happens. Obviously by the time this airs, we'll know what happened. But I think there's something to that. If we're kind of feeling that looking at it, and then two guys on the team that have played like a combined 25 years are freely talking about it, that's pretty good for me. That's good enough for me.
Last thing. I always like to ask you, learn from you, and have others learn from you as well. So, off season for the NFL. I'm in the process of making my decision of which things I will attend. Like, you've got the Senior Bowl, you've got the NFL Combine, and you got the NFL Owners Meeting.
Yeah.
If you had to prioritize those three of which to attend,
Yeah.
where would you spend your time?
Combine, then league meetings close behind, and then Senior Bowl for me. Now, I didn't go. I've only gone to the Senior Bowl a couple times. Partly that was just because over the years I wasn't looking to add another trip. Just time of being away from home, especially back when I traveled every week and all of that. Now, I don't travel during the season very much, so like it wouldn't be hard to add. But to me, the Combine is clearly number one because it's really there's so many of the people there with all of the staffs and the front offices for a long period of time, for like a week. So I try to stay as long as I can, and you just see so many people. The league meetings are different because you don't get the whole coaching staffs, and it's not nearly as long. You really only get 3 days if you're lucky, if you come in early, when people are there with their families, and it's quality, but it's definitely a smaller kind of smaller sort of fish pond there, right? There's bigger fish in it, but it's a smaller pond. And there's more boundaries because people have their families there. So you're not going to just at the combine, like everybody's just there. They got, and they have downtime in between events. There's people just, hey, they're clear for the next 3 hours. You can't beat that. To me, the combine, you just can't beat it.
Good to know. I may end up trying to hit all three this year and then figuring out in the future which I go to, but appreciate that insight. Mike, I won't ask you what you got coming up because I'm guessing you have no idea what you're going to have coming up after Friday unless you can predict
For
that
Monday,
already.
yeah. No, well, but what ran yesterday, if we're going to say if it's Friday to Thursday, what's running
Yeah.
Thursday is a look at whether the NFC North is the best division ever. And really,
Mm,
ever is probably going to be, I haven't written it this time, ever is probably going to be since realignment. That's just the fair time to have four teams in a division. But their point margin in non-division games is the best through this part of the season, like by far since 2002. It's like by like 100 points,
wow.
something like that. It's really kind of unbelievable. So I may look at the strength of divisions. I mean, I'm going to look at it, and that'll be my column for Thursday. People can check that out, unless something interrupts that from
I
publishing.
can't wait to
And
read
then
that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
I
So,
uh, I have to think Detroit's like carrying a lot of water there.
well, look at Minnesota's 9-2,
It's true.
and then and then look at Chicago. It has this bad record of 4-7, but like somehow lost all these games. Like they're winning the games, or they're
Hmm.
right there in the games. They had a couple bad blowouts, losses, but on the whole, been a really good division.
Yeah.
And the Packers,
Tough.
by the way, are like 8-3, right? Are the Packers
Right,
8-3?
right.
Yeah,
8-3. Tough year for the NFC West to draw the NFC North. That's for sure. I
yeah.
think that is contributing to the middling records that you're seeing coming out of the NFC West for sure.
Uh, and what division you play can determine how quote unquote dominant you are. So I'm not going to overthink it though. I think I'm just going to look at some of these indicators, and in doing so initially, it's quite telling. So with three of the four NFC North teams playing on Thanksgiving, that was kind of my plan. My column publishes Thursday. We'll publish it Thursday. See if anybody's got some room in there on their Thanksgiving menu to read about the division.
I will certainly do that. Mike, thank you as always. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will talk again next Friday.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. That is Mike Sando of The Athletic. Find all his stuff there. Great stuff as always. And, a lot of interesting pieces. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how things will go with coaching carousel next year. I'm so glad the Seahawks are not going to be on it for the most part. At least we don't know what will happen at the OC spot, at least. Who knows? Maybe Adam Dirty will get snapped up somewhere. Probably not. But, Mike McDonald seems like he's in a very good spot right here, and I think we're all pretty happy to have him exactly where he is. A good chance to remind you, if you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. If you've been doing super chats and you're wondering why I'm not responding or asking the questions that you're putting your good money behind, this isn't live today. I'm flying. As you're watching this, I am in the air on the way to New York to cover the game against the Jets. So I can't see what you posted, but I appreciate it. And thank you for the support. Also, want to tell you, it is Black Friday. So jkboots.com is where you want to go. This is a present you're going to get someone that they will never forget and absolutely appreciate that you've bought them. Code HawkBlogger for Black Friday. There's a special deal that they're running. Not only is like 40% off boots, but there is the Heritage boot. It's called the Archer in 6 new colors and includes a bison insole set and a matching belt. So really another extra. Plus, by using code HawkBlogger, you get a chance to win a Seahawks themed pair of boots. It's going to actually have the HB logo on it. It looks pretty cool, I have to tell you. And then also, you help the Wildland Firefighters Foundation. So help the Pacific Northwest by having a firefighter have a terrific pair of boots to keep them safe and keep all of us safe. So head on over to jkboots.com. Head over to FTN Fantasy. Use promo code HBAM, gets you an additional 15% off, less than $8 a month fantastic gift to give somebody. Get access to DVOA data, to Stats Hub, to the betting model. There's a Discord channel where you can talk about fantasy football. You can talk about still a chance to win your fantasy league with the insights you can get from this place. Plus, the betting model has a bunch of great stuff there to maybe make up for if you've lost your fantasy football season. Maybe you can make up a little ground on the sports betting side. So head over there. And then support our other partner, Pagliacci Pizza. Now's the time, post Thanksgiving, maybe you're still recovering from what you ate yesterday, but the autumn harvest pizzas for a limited time only, roasted delicata squash, layered with roasted Brussels sprouts and mozzarella and Parmesan over roasted garlic oil. Unbelievably tasty, as well as the pepperoni, which is my personal favorite. If you go to hello.pagliacci.com/hawk-blogger, you get access to all the best deals on Pagliacci Pizza just for Hawk Blogger listeners. And so head on over there. The link is in for all of these things. The link is in the description of the video. You can find it there. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And let's hope together that we are going to have a wonderful weekend for the Seahawks in New York. Tomorrow, you will find me and Jeff Simmons doing Seahawks Saturday. Exact timing to be determined is exactly the way you say it. Sunday, I have not determined exactly when I am going to be doing the pregame show. It is a 10 a.m. game Pacific time, so my pregame show may be super early. I might try to see if I can convince Brady Henderson to jump on with me. We'll see. I'll get there as early as I can on Sunday and go through that. So might be an early pregame show Sunday morning. Keep an eye out. Make sure you click like, click subscribe, click the bell to get notified when we go live. That way you will never miss a single second of what we have for you here. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and now Blue Sky at Hawk Blogger. This has been episode 250 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, y'all.